This is the story of she accepted a side job, without knowing it was her Black Millionaire boss's bachelor party. As it truly unfolded, Maya Chen had always been good with numbers, but terrible with timing. Standing in her cramped studio apartment at 11 p.m., staring at the eviction notice taped to her door, she realized that being the best junior accountant at Sterling Industries meant nothing when rent was due tomorrow, and her paycheck wouldn't clear until Friday. The fluorescent light above her flickered, casting harsh shadows across the crumpled bills scattered on her kitchen table like fallen leaves after a storm. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Event staff needed tomorrow night. Upscale private party $500 cash. Discreet service required. Reply, yes, if interested. $500. Exactly what she needed to avoid sleeping in her car. Maya's fingers trembled as she typed back, yes, before her rational mind could intervene. Sometimes desperation makes decisions faster than wisdom ever could. The response came immediately with an address in the hills and a simple instruction. Black cocktail attire. Ask for Marcus. 7 p.m. sharp. Maya had worked enough catering gigs in college to know the drill. Rich people throwing parties they'd rather forget. Staff who were paid to be invisible, she could do invisible. She'd been practicing it her whole life, especially at Sterling Industries where she spent her days buried in spreadsheets while her boss, James Sterling, commanded boardrooms 3 floors above her like some untouchable deity. If you've ever felt like you're living in 2 different worlds in the same building, you know exactly how suffocating that invisible barrier can feel. The next evening, Maya stood before a mansion that looked like it had been carved from marble and moonlight. Warm golden light spilled from floor-to-ceiling windows, and she could hear laughter echoing from within, the kind of carefree laughter that only comes from people who've never worried about rent. She smoothed her black dress, the nicest thing she owned, and rang the service entrance bell. Marcus turned out to be a tall man with kind eyes and the bearing of someone who'd seen enough wealthy excess to find it more amusing than impressive. You must be Maya, he said, handing her a silver tray. Simple job tonight. Serve drinks, clear glasses, stay professional. The host is getting married next week, so things might get a little wild, but nothing you can't handle. Maya nodded, grateful for work that didn't require her to think about her mounting bills. She slipped into the main room, and the opulence hit her like a wave. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across cream-colored walls adorned with art that probably cost more than her annual salary. Men in expensive suits clustered around a pool table, their voices carrying the confidence that comes from never having to check a bank balance. She was refilling champagne glasses when she heard a laugh that made her blood freeze. Deep, familiar. The same laugh that echoed through Sterling Industries' executive floor every morning when she arrived early to avoid the elevator crowds. Maya's hand trembled, nearly dropping the bottle as she turned slowly toward the sound. James Sterling stood by the fireplace, a crystal tumbler in his hand, his usually perfect tie loosened and his dark hair slightly disheveled. Even in this relaxed state, he commanded the room with an effortless magnetism that had made him a legend in the financial world before his 30th birthday. Maya had only seen him from a distance at work, but here, just 20 feet away, she could see the sharp intelligence in his dark eyes, the way his smile seemed to hold secrets. Panic shot through her chest like ice water. She spun around, nearly colliding with another server, her mind racing through escape routes. But Marcus was already approaching with a concerned expression, and running would only draw attention. Maya forced herself to breathe, to become the invisible person she'd always been at work. Just another face in black attire, serving people who never really saw the help anyway. For the next hour, she managed to avoid James's section of the room, staying close to the kitchen entrance, ready to disappear if necessary. But fate has a cruel sense of humor, and as Maya was collecting empty glasses from a side table, she heard footsteps approaching behind her. "Excuse me, could I get another whiskey?" Maya's entire body went rigid. She knew that voice, had heard it during the few times she'd been called to deliver reports to the executive floor. Slowly, she turned around, keeping her eyes downcast, praying that the dim lighting and her hair falling across her face would be enough camouflage. James Sterling stood before her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and warm that made her think of leather and cedar. He held out his empty glass with a casual smile, the kind of polite but distant expression wealthy people reserved for service staff. "Of course, sir," Maya whispered, taking the glass without looking up. Her voice came out smaller than intended, barely audible over the party's ambient noise. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Have we met before?" Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. "No, sir, I don't think so." James tilted his head, studying her with the same intensity he probably used to analyze market trends. "You seem familiar. Do you work in the city?" "Just catering, sir." The lie slipped out smoothly, born from pure survival instinct. James nodded slowly, but his eyes lingered on her face a moment longer than necessary before he turned back to his friends. Maya escaped to the kitchen, her hands shaking as she poured his whiskey. She had to get through this night without being recognized. Her job at Sterling Industries was the only stable thing in her life. Losing it would mean starting over completely. But as the evening progressed, Maya began to notice things that made her stomach churn. The party wasn't just celebrating James's upcoming marriage. It was celebrating the end of his freedom in ways that made her skin crawl. She overheard conversations about one last wild night and what happens here stays here. Men were making phone calls, and Maya caught glimpses of women arriving through the main entrance, their laughter too bright, their smiles too practiced. The realization hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't just a bachelor party. This was the kind of bachelor party that destroyed marriages before they even began. Maya found herself in an impossible position. She needed this job, needed the money desperately, but staying felt like becoming complicit in something that violated every moral fiber in her being. What would you do if your survival depended on witnessing someone else's betrayal? As she served another round of drinks, Maya overheard James's best man, a man with cold eyes and an expensive watch, talking on his phone. "Yeah, they'll be here soon. Sterling doesn't know the full plan yet, but once things get started, he won't be able to back out. The photos alone will ensure he stays in line for the merger." Photos. Maya's blood turned to ice. This wasn't just about infidelity. This was about blackmail. Someone was setting James up, using his bachelor party as a trap that would give them leverage over one of the most powerful men in the city. Maya had spent enough time processing Sterling Industries' financial reports to understand the implications. James was about to close the biggest merger in the company's history, a deal that would affect thousands of jobs, including her own. If someone had compromising material on him, they could control not just his personal life, but the entire direction of the company. She glanced across the room at James, who was laughing at something his friend had said, completely unaware of the web being spun around him. In that moment, he didn't look like the untouchable executive from the 42nd floor. He looked like someone about to walk into a trap that would destroy everything he'd built. Maya made a decision that surprised even her. She pulled out her phone and quickly typed a text to James's number. She'd memorized it from company directories during late-night overtime sessions. "You need to leave. Now, trust me." She watched as James felt his phone buzz, saw him frown as he read the message from an unknown number. His eyes scanned the room, and for a terrifying moment, Maya thought he might call out, might demand to know who had sent it. Instead, he typed back, "Who is this?" Maya's fingers flew across her phone screen. "Someone who knows what's really happening tonight. Check your best man's phone. Look at his recent calls." James's expression shifted from confusion to something harder, more alert. Maya watched as he casually approached his best man, engaging him in conversation while subtly glancing at the man's phone screen. Whatever James saw there made his entire demeanor change. The easy smile vanished, replaced by the calculating expression Maya recognized from his business dealings. James excused himself and stepped onto the terrace, his phone already at his ear. Maya couldn't hear what he was saying, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his free hand clenched into a fist. When he returned to the party, he was a different person, still playing the role of celebrating groom-to-be, but with the sharp awareness of someone who'd just realized he was surrounded by enemies. The evening took a dramatic turn when James announced he was feeling unwell and needed to cut the party short. His best man protested, insisting the real entertainment hadn't arrived yet, but James was firm. Within 30 minutes, the mansion was empty except for the catering staff. Maya was collecting the last of the glasses when she felt someone watching her. She turned to find James standing in the doorway, having changed from his party clothes into jeans and a simple black sweater. Without the expensive suit and surrounded by luxury, he looked younger, more human. "The catering company said they only sent 4 staff members tonight," James said quietly, "but I count 5 people who've been serving drinks." Maya's heart stopped. She'd been so focused on the immediate crisis that she'd forgotten about her own deception. "I know you," James continued, stepping closer. "You're Maya Chen from accounting. You process the quarterly reports I review every month." There was no point in denying it now. Maya set down the tray she'd been holding and faced him directly for the first time all evening. "Yes. Why are you here?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications Maya wasn't sure she was ready to face. She could lie, make up some story about needing extra money for a vacation or shopping. But looking into James's eyes that had just been opened to betrayal from his closest friends, Maya found herself telling the truth. "I'm about to be evicted," she said simply. "I needed $500 to make rent, and this job paid cash." James studied her face, and Maya saw something she'd never expected: understanding. "You saved me tonight," he said. "Why?" Maya thought about the question, about all the easy answers she could give, because it was the right thing to do, because she couldn't stand by and watch someone be destroyed, because even powerful people deserved honesty. But the real answer was more complicated. "Because I know what it's like to feel trapped," she said finally. "I couldn't watch someone trap you, even if you'd never know it was me who could have stopped it." James was quiet for a long moment, processing not just her words, but the implications of everything that had happened. "My best man has been working with our biggest competitor," he said. "They were planning to use tonight to get leverage over me, to force me to tank the merger from the inside." "Will you call off the wedding?" Maya asked, though she immediately regretted the personal question. James's smile was sad but genuine. "There is no wedding. There never was. The engagement was part of the business strategy, a way to appear more stable for the merger. But my fiancé was in on the setup too. Everything was fake." The revelation hit Maya like a wave. The untouchable James Sterling, the man who seemed to have everything, had been living a completely fabricated life. "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it. "Don't be. You just saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life, trusting people who saw me as nothing more than a means to an end." James walked to the window, looking out at the city lights spread below like fallen stars. "I've spent so much time building walls to protect my success that I forgot to build bridges to connect with real people. Tonight, the only person who showed me genuine loyalty was someone I'd never even properly met." Maya felt something shift in the air between them, a recognition that went deeper than employer and employee, deeper than rich and poor. "What happens now?" she asked. James turned back to her, and his expression was different. Not the distant politeness of a boss, but the direct gaze of someone seeing her as an equal for the first time. "Now I clean house, fire the people who betrayed me, restructure the company leadership by and make sure this merger happens on honest terms." He paused, studying her face in the soft light. "And I offer you a position that actually matches your intelligence. I've been reviewing those quarterly reports for 2 years. Maya, the analysis you include in the footnotes is better than what I get from my senior staff." Maya felt her world tilting on its axis. "Sir, James," he corrected, "and this isn't charity. I need people I can trust, and you've proven that your integrity isn't for sale." As they stood in that empty mansion, surrounded by the remnants of a party built on lies, Maya realized that sometimes the worst nights can become the foundation for the best changes. She thought about her eviction notice, about the bills scattered across her kitchen table, about all the times she'd felt invisible in her own life. "There's one condition," James said, his tone becoming more serious. "I need to know that if you see me making a mistake, personal or professional, you'll tell me, no matter how uncomfortable it makes you." Maya looked at this man who controlled a business empire, but had just learned he couldn't control the people closest to him. She thought about the courage it had taken to send that first text, about the choice between safety and doing what was right. "I can do that," she said. James smiled, and for the first time since she'd known of his existence, it looked completely genuine. "Then welcome to the executive team, Maya Chen." 6 months later, Maya stood in her new office on the 42nd floor, looking down at the city that had once seemed so impossible to conquer. The merger had gone through successfully, creating thousands of new jobs and revolutionizing the industry. James had restructured the entire company culture, prioritizing transparency and ethical leadership over the old boys club mentality that had nearly destroyed him. But the most unexpected change had been personal. As Maya and James worked together to rebuild his professional relationships, they discovered a connection that went far beyond business. Late nights reviewing contracts had turned into conversations about dreams and fears. Strategy meetings had become opportunities to share stories about their very different childhoods and surprisingly similar values. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from James. "Dinner tonight? I promise it's not a work meeting this time." She smiled, remembering the terrified woman who'd served drinks at a bachelor party that never should have happened. That version of herself could never have imagined that her worst financial crisis would lead to the best opportunity of her life, not just professionally, but personally. Sometimes the most beautiful stories begin in the darkest moments, when we're forced to choose between what's easy and what's right. Maya had chosen right, and in saving James from a trap built by false friends, she'd freed them both to build something real. If stories like this remind you that integrity always finds a way to shine through, even in the darkest circumstances, consider subscribing so we can continue exploring these moments when ordinary people make extraordinary choices. Because sometimes, the person who saves you is the one you never saw coming.